Hi everybody, it's Doug Vanderweide, and today we're going to use an Azure ARM template to deploy two virtual machines in an availability set, and these virtual machines are going to actually be behind an internal load balancer, and they're going to work in tandem to receive FTP files. I've got a blog series all about why I'm doing this and about how I'm doing this. Basically, it touches on how I use these servers to automatically process inbound FTP files. That whole blog series is on my blog. Check the description, you can find a link to get to that. But back to the point at hand. So I've got this ARM template, and as you can see, it's pretty much a doozy. It's got a lot of lines, and I'm not going to actually get into this ARM template and how it's configured. That's really more in depth than I want to get for a YouTube video. That is described to some degree in the blog post. Again, check the link below. What I really just want to do is show you how I'm actually going to deploy these templates. So I've got the actual template itself, and this is going to design the virtual machines, the network that they're going to live inside, the network interfaces that are going to allow me to route traffic to them, and the storage account that's actually going to hold the VHDs, the virtual hard drives. I've also got as well this parameters file, and what this parameters file is going to do is pass into this ARM template certain runtime parameters that I want to have. In this case, it's going to be the name of the storage account I want to create, the name of the virtual machine's admin user and its password, the DNS name that's going to be used to resolve this, so that people can go to the .com name, if you will, that people can get to it on, the name of the load balancer, so on and so forth. Anyway, again, if you want more detail on that, check out the blog posts. Okay, so the very first thing I want to do, since I'm working with these ARM templates, and by the way, I got these ARM templates on the Quick Start, which Azure has in GitHub. It's got a whole bunch of templates there that can pretty much do anything, and a lot of them are really ready for primetime templates. I mean, you can just download them and fire them off. This template I modified to some degree from a template that's actually at the Quick Start, and again, check the description for the link to that Quick Start. Anyway, the first thing I want to do, because I did modify this template, first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that it links. In other words, I want to make sure that the JSON that's in both this file and in the parameters file, that's in the template itself and the parameters file, I want to make sure that JSON will actually parse. To do that, I'm actually going to go over to this website called jsonlint.com. This is the one I tend to use for JSON linting. If I did a lot more JSON, if I wrote a lot more JSON, I probably wouldn't use this web tool. I'd probably either get its source code, which you can see is available here on GitHub, or I would get a desktop client or something like that. But for right now, this is fine, right? So I've got my files saved locally here. I've actually got them in this text file. I'm going to go ahead and start with the template itself. I'm just going to dump it into this box and ask it to validate the JSON. Bingo, it likes it. The validation is good, so I know that that template's fine. I also want to do the same exact thing with the parameters file. So I want to copy the parameters file. I want to come back over here and make sure that that links as well. And yes, it links as well. So the good news is I know that in the structural sense, in the sense of is this valid JSON that I've got here, the answer is yes. So I know that I can probably pass these files in to PowerShell, and they'll at least parse. They may not actually work, but they will at least parse. And that's something. Okay, I'm ready to log into Azure. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and type here in PowerShell, add Azure RM account. Notice that I'm using the Azure RM account rather than just add Azure account. If I didn't use the Azure RM account, if I used add Azure account, I would be in the old Service Manager or Classic version of PowerShell, and I wouldn't be able to run this ARM template. I need to be in the Resource Manager version of PowerShell's Azure module in order to actually be able to execute this template. So when I hit return, dialog comes up. It asks me for my Azure account. I'll go ahead and type in that right now. And that's my username and the password I've copied previously. When I sign in, you can see right here I'm shown, here's the account that I'm going to actually use. So I get a tenant ID and a subscription ID and a subscription name. Okay, I have more than one Azure subscription on this account, so I want to make sure that I swap over to the correct subscription, and to do that I use the command set Azure RM context. As you can see, I've got a subscription name. I'm sorry I would have to blur it out for you, but I don't want to give away company secrets. So I hit return, and I get another confirmation up, and now you can see it shows me a different, well, you can't see it, but it shows me a different subscription name. So now I know I'm on the right subscription, and I've got a new command prompt. Because this is a brand new deployment, I'm going to make a resource group for it. I don't actually have an existing resource group. If I did have an existing resource group that I wanted this deployment to go to, I could skip this step. But since this is a brand new deployment with brand new stuff, I'm going to go ahead and create a new resource group right here. As you can see, I'm going to name it DVFDP, and I'm going to go ahead and set that to be in East US. This should be instantaneous or take very little time. And as you can see, bingo. So I now have a resource group into which I can deploy this template. In order to deploy the template, you have to have a resource group on hand first. Okay, the resource group is ready, and I've cleared PowerShell because I'm going to do some testing. What I specifically want to do is I want to see whether or not this template tests okay. So I'm going to show you first what it looks like if the template tests all right. So I've got the template test right here. It's test Azure RM resource group deployment. I have to name the Azure resource group that I'm going to have. Let me get the cursor out of the way so you can see that. I need to give the name of the template file and the name of the parameter file. So I'm going to test this template, and I know that the template's going to test okay. And what will happen when it tests okay is it'll take just a second, and the command prompt will come back up again. So PowerShell isn't going to say anything explicit. It's just basically no news is good news. Basically, we're running this command. And it takes a moment to parse, and bingo. The command prompt comes back up, and that's how I know this template parses. Again, this does not mean that the template is not going to generate errors at runtime. It may very well generate errors at runtime. What it means is, as PowerShell looked at the template and looked at the parameters file, and they both checked out okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back, and I'm going to show you what happened, the kind of errors you're probably going to run into when it doesn't test okay. Okay, in this example, you can see I've added to the parameters file a value that isn't actually in the template. So I've got this new parameter named foo in the parameters file with a value of bar, but there is no foo parameter in the template itself. So if I come back over here to PowerShell and I run that same test commandlet, test Azure RM resource group deployment, you can see I get an answer back that says invalid template. And it tells me specifically you've got this parameter foo in your parameters file, but it doesn't actually exist in the template. So we can't run parameter files that contain parameters that aren't actually in the template. If you see this error, that's what it means. It means in your parameter file, you've got a variable that isn't actually in the template. Okay, now I've gone and added a mistake to one of the values in the parameters file. In this case, you can see here the DNS name for the load balancer. I provided capital letters FTP in the value. But Azure will only allow me to actually use lowercase values when I create that DNS name. So all the letters have to be lowercase, and they can't have any spaces or things like that, right? It has to be a valid name for a fully qualified domain name. In this case, it's not because I've got capital letters. So when I come and test it again, this time I get an error that says it's an invalid template deployment. And you can see that it doesn't actually tell me that that's the problem. It gives me some tracing information, but unfortunately there's no way from PowerShell or even really from the portal or anyplace else to actually see what the error is in these traces. However, that said, if your template lints, generally speaking, if you get an invalid template deployment error like this, what it means is you've either used a name for something that needs to be unique and isn't. For example, a storage account. You've used the name for a storage account that somebody else is using that same storage account name. Or what's happened is you've done something illegal in your naming. In this case, again, what happened was I put things uppercase that can't be uppercase. So if I just fix that, I should be all right. It's also possible that what's happened is you've got some misspelled variable name someplace in your template, or you've got you've called for something where it isn't actually supposed to be, that kind of thing. But generally speaking, most of the time when you get this error, it's because you're using a name that's already in use, or you've illegally named something. Okay, before I actually execute this deployment or this Azure ARM template, I want to show you the resource group that I created earlier here in the portal. You can see here it is. You can see I have no deployments and there are no resources in this group. So this is just basically proof positive that there's nothing here before we actually execute the template. Okay, we're going to go ahead and execute our template now, finally, right? We're actually going to do it. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and use the new Azure RM Resource Group Deployment commandlet. Again, let me get the cursor out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. I have to give this a name, and this name needs to be unique. And you should use some sort of convention that basically allows you to keep track of your deployments, because a big benefit of the ARM template system is that you can do versioning. So if I go ahead and keep renaming each one of these deployments, I can see which version of the deployment it is that things changed in. It helps me basically keep track of when did certain services come online, when was the last time we had a good state, that kind of thing, right? Resource group name, I have to name the resource group to which the resources are going to be deployed. And again, I have to give the name of the template, and I have to give the name of the parameters. When I hit return, once again, PowerShell isn't going to show me anything. It's just kind of going to go blank, and it's going to sit there and be blank for a little while. Don't shut down PowerShell when you do this. Actually, technically, you can shut down PowerShell if you want to. It's just you won't get a report back, of course, if you close it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit return. PowerShell is going to look like it's doing nothing, and it's just going to sit here for a while. I just wanted to show you that PowerShell is still not reporting any success for the processing of this ARM template. But if I come over here to the portal, I can see some of the resources have been deployed. In fact, I can actually see my load balancer has been deployed. Both of the network interfaces have been deployed. I've got my public IP. The virtual network is created, and the availability set is created. So I'm waiting on the storage account that's going to hold my disks, and I'm waiting on the virtual machines. Virtual machines, of course, can't be spun up until that storage account is made. So as soon as the storage account comes up, then the virtual machines will be made. If I hit refresh, maybe we'll see that that's actually been done. So there you can see. Now I've got the storage account, and I've got both VMs. Is PowerShell done yet? PowerShell still hasn't reported its success. That may be because there may be a little bit of configuration still going on with attaching the NICs to the VMs and whatnot. But we should see success reported here fairly soon. And several minutes later, you can see sweet success. So you can see from this table, our deployment succeeded. We're shown the time that it happened at, and we're shown all the different pieces that came together. We've got a storage account, we've got VMs, we've got NICs, we've got public IPs, we've got virtual networking. Let's actually pop over here into the portal and see the specifics. So, as you can see here in the portal, we also see success. The very first thing we've got is a load balancer that's going to direct traffic between the VMs on its shared ports. We've got two network interfaces, one for each VM. Those control the private passive ports and the RDP ports as well. We've also got a public IP, a storage account, a virtual network, an availability set which should keep these machines from failing at the same time or restarting at the same time, and our two virtual machines. If I click here on the deployment link, you can see I'm showing the deployment right here, and when I click on that, I get a new blade that comes up, and it shows me all the resources that were deployed and how they went, as well as all the environment variables that I passed in. These are all the parameters basically that came in. And you can see I can both view the template, redeploy it, or delete this deployment. That's a nice thing about using an Azure ARM template too, is if I just basically keep, every time I need to change these resources, if I do it through the same ARM template, every one of those deployments, I'll be able to delete them if they go badly, and it will roll me back to the previous deployment. So, if I want, I can actually go ahead and take a look at this template right here, and you can see it's the same exact template that I sent in previously. So that's it for deploying virtual machines with an Azure ARM template. Thanks for watching. If you have questions, comments, I'd love to hear them. Go ahead and send in a comment, And again, don't forget to check out the description. There's all kinds of links to blog posts and other stuff that's going to be real helpful in understanding what I did here today. Again, thanks for watching.